I have the lights on, so good. We're good there, right? And we start options. Fast text speed, that's fine. Hear any music yet? Roll back. Yeah, I don't know what I need. I don't play visual novels, so I'm not sure what all these things are. I can try to full screen it. Windowed full screen, sure. Sure, we'll go windowed full screen. See if all right. I guess we start, huh? Let's get creepy. Mask of the Red Death. So we have buttons. Quick saves, preferences. Okay, that takes me here. Return. There's the button. It's already started. I mean, boom. No, I think Doug, this is a graphic, what they call a visual novel, called what is it called? The Phenomenon of Edgar Allan Poe, one half or one out of two. It's supposedly creepy, kind of gory, anime. They claim it's anime style, and we just pressed start. So let's start. Literally, this is my first visual novel I've ever played. I'm pretty sure. So we're gonna experience a bunch of things, I've no doubt. The Red Death had ravaged the country for a long time. Never has a plague been so fatal and so frightening. Blood was his incarnation, thus being his seal. Red, just like the horror of blood, it started with sharp pains. Sudden vertigo. Then the pores would bleed and death ensued. The scarlet stains on the body and face of the victim were the side of the plague, isolating her from all help and sympathy and the invasion. Progress and end of the disease were accomplished in half an hour. Oh, that's brutal. Half an hour. The prosperous prince was happy, fearless, and shrewd. When his dominions were half depopulated, he called to his side 1,000 robust and unscrupulous friends from among the knights and ladies of his court. And with them withdrew to the safe confinement of one of his fortified abbeys. It was of vast, magnificent construction and had been created by the eccentric yet majestic taste of the prince. Strong and high walls surrounded it. The gates of the wall were iron. Once inside, the courtiers brought forges and heavy hammers and wielded the bolts. I turned it up, but actually it might be a little too loud. Let me know if the sound of the game is a little too loud. Turn it down for myself. The strong high wall surrounded the gates from wall were iron. Once inside, the courtiers brought forges, heavy hammers, and wielded the bolts. They had resolved to leave no avenue of entry or exit to the sudden impulses of despair or frenzy. The abbey was extensively provisioned. So did we bring 1,000 people in here to, like, kill each other? With similar precautions, the courtiers could challenge the infection. Or I'm not sure what's going on. But the outside world fend for itself. Meanwhile, it was madness to grieve or meditate. Okay, good to know. It's not too loud. The prince had gathered everything necessary for pleasure. There were buffoons, improvisers, dancers, and musicians. There was beauty and wine. All that and security were on the inside. Outside was the Red Death, at the end of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and when the plague was wreaking the most terrible ravages. The prosperous prince offered to his 1,000 friends a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. That masquerade was a voluptuous painting, but let me first describe the halls where it was held. There were 7 of them, in an imperial series of rooms in most of the palaces. In most of the palaces, the succession of rooms form a long gallery in a straight line, since the double doors open until they were attached to the walls, allowing the view to reach the entire gallery. Here it was something very different. It might be expected of the prince's love of the strange. The rooms were arranged with such irregularity that the vision could not cover more than one at a time. Every 20 or 30 yards there was a sharp bend. Ooh. It seems like purposefully obtuse, right? And in each of the new effect was born. To the right and left of the middle of the wall, a tall, narrow Gothic window overlooked a closed corridor that followed the outline of a series of halls. I just hope there's like not a lot of jump scares or something. We'll see. See if any of it's a more visual novel than horror game, but I think it definitely got a heavy. It's supposedly multiple choice. I guess that's a thing with visual novels, multiple choice. The windows had stained glass windows whose coloration varied with the dominant tone of the room decoration. If, for example, the chamber at the eastern end had blue tapestries, vividly blue were its windows. The second room had purple tapestries and ornaments, and here the stained glass was purple. The third was entirely green, and so were the crystals. The fourth had been decorated and illuminated in an orange hue. The fifth, the white. The sixth with violet. The seventh room was completely covered in black velvet draperies, covering the ceiling and walls, falling in heavy folds onto a carpet of the same material and hue. No, actually, I don't think I've read or heard any of Poe's stories. In the chamber, the color of the windows did not correspond to the decoration. The crystals were scarlet. They had a deep color of blood. Despite the profusion of gold ornaments that appeared here and there are hung from the ceilings in those 7 rooms, there were no lamps or chandeliers. The cameras were not lit with candles or spiders. But the corridors parallel to the gallery and opposite each window were raised heavy tripods and supported a fiery brazier, whose rays projected through the tinted glass and illuminated each room brilliantly. In that way, they produced a multitude of brilliance, as vivid as they were fantastic. But in the west chamber, the black chamber, that fire that through the blood-colored crystals spilled over the gloomy hangings, produced a terrible, sinister effect and gave such a strange coloration to the faces of those who entered it. In it were few were bold enough to set foot there. In this room against the west wall leaned a gigantic ebony clock. I guess this thing. Its pendulum swung with a dull, heavy, monotonous ring, and when the minute hand had completed its circuit and the hour was about to strike, a clear and resonant chime was born from the mechanism's bronze and trails, full of music, but its tone and emphasis were such that every hour the orchestra musicians were forced to momentarily interrupt their performance to hear the sound. So everyone could hear it, huh? The dancing couples forcibly stopped their evolutions for a moment. In that gay society, confusion reigned. Okay, so it's not meant to be like a good thing. Maybe. And while the tolls of the clock still resounded, it was possible to observe that the most reckless paled and those of more age and reflection cast their hands over their foreheads, as if they were indulging in confused meditation or a dream. But as soon as the echoes ceased altogether, slight laughter was born in the assembly. The musicians looked at each other as if smiling at their senseless nervousness. So it's just an awkward interruption, huh? Every hour. Whispering to each other that the next chime of the clock would not provoke such an emotion in them, but at the end of 60 minutes, spanning 3,600 seconds of time that flees, the clock struck the hour, and again confusion, trembling, and meditation were born. Despite this, the party was joyous and magnificent. The prince had unique preferences. His eyes were especially sensitive to colors and their effects. He disdained the vulgarities of mere fashion. His plans were bold and fiery, his conceptions glowed with barbaric splendor. Some might have believed that he was crazy. His courtiers felt that it was not so. It was necessary to hear, see, and touch him to be sure that he was not. The prince had personally taken care of much of the decoration of 7 rooms for the great feast, and his taste had guided the choice of costumes. These were grotesque, no doubt. Why? He arranged in them the brilliance. Yeah, this is Poe. Like, is any of this familiar, or is this like a similarity to Poe? Or is this like ripped straight from one of Poe's works? He arranged in them the brilliance, the splendor, the spiciness, and the ghostly, most of that which was later to be found in Hernani, seeing arabesque figures with incongruous silhouettes and attire. This is Mask of the Red Death, actually. How did you know? Contemplating delusional fantasies such as maniac's love, the beautiful, the strange, the licentious abounded there, and the terrible and the propellant were not lacking. Indeed, in those 7 chambers, a multitude of dreams moved from one side to the other, and those dreams contorted everywhere, changing color as he passed through the chambers, making the strange music of the orchestra seem to echo his footsteps. But again the clock that stands in the velvet rooms tolls. For a moment everything is still. All is silence except the voice of the clock. Dreams are frozen, rigid in their position. The echoes of the ringing are lost. They have barely lasted an instant, and a light, half-stifled laugh floats behind them in their flight. Again the music grows. They live their dreams. Writhing from here to there with more joy than ever, coloring themselves as they pass in front of the windows, through which the rays of the tripods burst, but in the chamber that faces the west, no mask ventures. The night advances, and a redder light filters through the blood-colored crystals. Your memory's not good enough to know if this is verbatim, but I guess it isn't far off, okay? Terrifying is the darkness of the black hangings, and for those whose feet are placed on the dark carpet. I'm curious though, being a multiple choice, like there's some... I'm wondering then if this is perhaps true to the story. The multiple choice, I wonder if you're not familiar with the story and you don't know Get your complete works of Poe and check. So if maybe this being a multiple choice story and you choose the wrong thing, you're going against the real story. But if you know the story, you can always choose the right path, perhaps. Or maybe there's some liberty taken as to how the story actually progresses from here. A muffled ringing sounds... Interesting to see. A muffled ringing sounds much more solemn comes from the ebony clock than those who manage to hear the masks given to the distant joy of the other rooms. Congregating a dense crowd in the ladder, where the heart of life ardently beat. Continued the party in its whirlwind until the moment when the clock began to toll, announcing midnight. She then stopped the music. As I've already said, in the evolutions of those who danced were interrupted, as before there was an anguished cessation, but this time the clock had to strike 12 chimes, well, being 12 o'clock, right? Perhaps that is why it happened that the thoughts invaded in greater numbers the meditations of those who reflected among the crowd given to the party. Perhaps that is also why it happened that, before the last echoes of the chime had sunk into silence, many of those in attendance had time to notice the presence of a masked figure who had hitherto not attracted anyone's attention. And the news, that new presence having spread in a whisper, rising at the end of a rumor that expressed disapproval, surprise, and finally terror, horror, and disgust. In an assembly of ghosts such as the one I've just described, one can imagine that an ordinary apparition would not have caused such a commotion. The debauchery of that masquerade had no limits. But the figure in question surpassed it and even went beyond what the prince's liberal criteria tolerated. In the hearts of the most reckless, there are strings that cannot be played without emotion. Even the most relaxed of beings for whom life and death are equally a game, he knows that there are things that cannot be played with. The attendees seemed to feel deep down that the stranger's suit and appearance revealed neither wit nor decorum. His figure, tall and skinny, was wrapped from head to toe in a shroud. Edgar Allan Poe, though, right? The mask that concealed his face still resembled the countenance of an already rigid corpse. At closer scrutiny would have been difficult to uncover the deception. True, this frantic crowd could tolerate, if not approve, such a disguise, but the masked man had dared to assume the appearance of the Red Death. His shroud was spattered with blood. I wonder if it's real or if it's part of the costume. And his broad forehead, as well as his face, was stained with scarlet horror. When the prosperous prince's eyes fell on the ghostly image, which now, with a slow and solemn movement as if to highlight its role, was strolling among the dancers, convulsing at first with a shudder of terror and disgust, but immediately his forehead reddened with rage. "Who dares?" he asked hoarsely to the courtiers around him. "Who dares insult us with this blasphemous mockery? Seize him and unmask him so that we know who we are going to hang at dawn on the battlements." As he spoke those words, the prosperous prince was in the eastern room, the blue room. His accents rang loud and clear in the 7 rooms, for the prince was a bold and robust man, and the music had just ceased at the sign of his hand. With a group of pale courtiers at his side was the prince in the blue room. As soon as he had spoken, those present made a movement in the direction of the intruder, who at that moment was within reach of him, and was approaching the prince with a calm and deliberate step. Oh, he's headed for him. With unspeakable apprehension, the insane appearance of the masked man had produced the courtiers prevent anyone from raising their hands to stop him. Thus, unimpeded, with the same solemn and measured step that had distinguished him from the beginning and from the blue chamber, he went to purple, from purple to green, from green to orange, this to white, and from there to purple before anyone had decided to stop him. Who? Okay, here's our first choice. So we could either face this monstrosity or we can try to run away from it, I guess, huh? I don't see. I mean, if we face it, we're only going by what the prince wants, right? We're going to face the fears. So let's face it. We're gonna stay true to the prince. But then the prosperous prince, maddened by rage and shame at his momentary cowardice, rushed through the 6 rooms, no one following him because of the deadly terror that paralyzed everyone. He, dagger in hand, impetuously approaching until he reached 3 or 4 paces from the figure, which was still moving away, when the latter, reaching the end of the velvet room, suddenly turned and faced his pursuer. A high-pitched scream fell as the dagger fell, gleaming on the black carpet, and the prosperous prince collapsed dead. Gathering the terrible courage of despair, numerous masks were thrown into the black chamber, but seizing the stranger, whose tall figure stood erect and motionless in the shadow of the ebony clock. They recoiled in unspeakable horror, discovered that the shroud and the cadaverous masks they had so roughly grasped contained no tangible form. Then they recognized the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one the guests fell into the blood-stained orgy rooms. And each died in the desperate attitude of his downfall, and the life of the ebony clock faded with that of the last of those merry beings, and the flames of the tripods expired. Oh, did we lose already? So darkness, corruption, the Red Death dominate everything. Well, I mean, we tried. So okay, so we can we can try to keep running away, right? So that's it? What? Did I did I do the wrong thing? Both choices lead to the wrong to what? What's going on? Did I am I missing something here? Um, let's try in Spanish. Maybe something's wrong with the English version. Um, okay. Something's potentially wrong. It's got the Spanish one. Um, what has anyone noticed if I'm doing something wrong here? Uh, there's nothing left. There's nothing else to click. There's just like I don't know if there's very little on this game too. Like, let me quit out.